All right, so here's what I'm concerned about with Black Lives Matter. I guess there's lots of stuff to be concerned about, but it seems to me that they don't have a good sense of priorities. And I put a little whiteboard graph on Twitter in which I showed a large bubble diagram. And most of the bubble, 95% of the bubble was labeled schools are racist. And then little 5% of the bubble, I labeled everything else, every other problem basically. So here's what I mean by that. While there are lots of things where you would find systemic racism if you looked for it, especially in outcomes, you'd find it in the judicial system, you'd find it in employment, you'd find it all over the place. But the way I would look at this is in terms of where the biggest impact would be if you could fix it. Fixing things after people are 35 years old is really hard. Fixing things when they're first born so that they get a good start in life is going to be a much higher impact. So if I were Black Lives Matter and I cared about black lives, I would be ignoring the police shootings, which the studies don't really support is even real. Now let me say that again. The studies do support that black people are killed by police as in a higher percentage than their population, but not a higher percentage than the number of people who are stopped. It makes complete sense because high crime areas have a certain characteristic. So the biggest thing that Black Lives Matter is protesting against probably isn't even real. But the part that everybody agrees is real is that school and maybe the family unit, we'll talk about that, are the most important things to get right. But you don't hear Black Lives Matter talking about school and the family unit too much, do you? Why is that? If 95% of the problem is that early life experience, why is Black Lives Matter acting like 95% of the problem for their own people don't matter? They're literally treating 95% of the problem like it doesn't matter. They've identified the only thing that doesn't show up in statistics, which is that police are targeting black people for death. It's the only thing you can't find in the statistics. And they've targeted that. I think that tells you that they're not about helping black people. Now, I'm not saying they don't want to help black people, but it's obvious that whatever their motive is, it's not primarily about helping black people. There seems to be a political motive because going after the police gets you closer to a revolution, if you know what I mean. If your objective was to change the nature of the country, going after the police might be a good way to do it. If your objective is to make life better for black citizens in this country, you'd go after the school and you would just forget about everything else. Because if you fix the schools, and I'm going to say that the family situation and the school are kind of blended because it's hard to separate those two things. But if you fix that stuff, would you have as much trouble in 20 years, shall we say, with anything? Wouldn't it fix everything? Now you're still going to have, racism, as I like to say every 10 minutes, can never go away. It's like rain, but you can buy an umbrella, right? So the umbrella in this case, in my analogy, would be an education or training or staying out of jail or not being on drugs, don't join a gang. There's simple things you can do to stay out of the rain, but you can't make rain not happen. That's not an option. You can't make the rain stop. And you can't make human brains no longer biased in a whole variety of ways. Race is just one of infinite ways that your brain is biased. You can't remove bias. You can teach yourself to overcome it. You can have laws. You can have, you can do a lot of things to reduce it or to make it less important, but you can't get rid of it. And so even trying to get rid of it shows that maybe there's another motive because it doesn't even make sense.